Stay frosty and head over to EasyMut.com for the cheapest MUT coins on the market. And when I say cheapest, I mean it. We're talking 1 million coins for around $40. Use code DIRECTOR for 5% off. Yo, hola, brothers, what's up? It's the Director. And Chargers fans, it's been an interesting free agent period in the NFL. Lots of one-year prove-it deals. Of course, a lot of teams trying to wiggle around the cap situation of 2021 post-pandemic. And the Chargers, so far, not doing a terrible job. I would say the number one priority for me as a Chargers fan was getting Justin Herbert the protection on that offensive line that he deserves. Not often do you come by a quarterback like Justin Herbert, and when you do, you want to make sure that he's taking as little hits as possible. We saw what happened with Joe Burrow. Oh man, you just hate to see it. So with Justin Herbert, protection number one, I'm really happy with some of the moves that the Chargers have been making. Obviously got Will Filer, Corey Linsley. We just added Ode Ibushi the other day. I'm very optimistic with where this line is headed. Of course, the Chargers aren't done with the offensive line, nor are they with a lot of other positions. With the free agent period, the Chargers did lose some players as well, including Casey Hayward Jr., which honestly created a massive hole for our number one cornerback position. And this has got Chargers fans a little bit antsy, right? We're starting to think like, what are we going to do in the draft? A lot of things are about to change with how the Chargers address free agency, including priorities. The priority of cornerback just shot up the Chargers draft board. So in today's video, I kind of want to reiterate with you guys that free agency isn't done. We're kind of in that period where Tom Telesco likes to operate, you know, like the first, second, maybe even third waves of free agency are over and done with, and the remaining players will likely come at a very, very cheap cost. So in today's video, we're going to be going over the positions of need for the Chargers and trying to figure out the best remaining free agents that they can target right now. Some of these guys are great depth signings. Other these guys could potentially be starters for the Chargers going into the 2021 season. We've got some work to do, guys. There's a lot of things that Chargers could do, a lot of free agents that I was hoping we would pick up that we didn't, but I think a lot of that can be massaged before the NFL draft coming up next month. So before we do get started, guys, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this content, the small amount of time you guys take to the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Truly, guys, it does. We're really close to 29,000 subs. Thank you guys so much. Let's pass that 30,000 sub mark by the time the draft gets here. Let's get into this video, guys. Lights, camera, action. The best remaining free agents that the Chargers should consider targeting. Now, there's a couple of free agents, guys, that really hurt me as far as the Chargers not pursuing more aggressively. Probably the biggest one that you guys were, especially if you follow me on Twitter. Guys, make sure you're following me on Twitter at Kiwi_filmmaker. I just word spit all my thoughts out on Twitter for the most part. And if you guys are following me there, you'll know that my heart was set on picking up Will Fuller or Kyle Fuller from the Bears, who they just out of nowhere decided to release last week. Guys, that was like, when it comes to perfect scheme fit, outside of maybe Jalen Ramsey, I think Kyle Fuller was the best option available, and he didn't really sign for much. A 1 year, $9.5 million option with the Denver Broncos, of all places. That one sucked. I was really hoping, and the Chargers were on the phone with him. I actually posted this on Twitter the other day. I said the fact that the Chargers were even on the phone for Kyle Fuller does speak to the Chargers, I guess, need at the cornerback position. They're actively shopping to fill that roster spot, because right now, guys, we've got Chris Harris Jr., which is, you know, he's still pretty good. We re-signed Michael Davis, which was a really big signing for us. And then who's our cornerback 3? Campbell? Faison? I don't know. I really don't, guys. So it's going to be a big spot for the Chargers to address with the remaining free agents. And I do think that there is potential to pick up a I don't know, number one cornerback you could say, but I think more importantly some depth too, because I 100% believe that the Chargers are going to be targeting cornerback in the draft, whether it be Asante Samuel, who's the most popular pick to the Chargers right now in the second round, or maybe even like a J.C. Horn / Caleb Farley, who I think is going to dip a little bit because of his back injury, etc., etc. The Chargers really are starting to be linked to cornerbacks because of this. So before we start going through these guys, I'm going to try and make this video not terribly long, but we have a lot of names to go through. I need to show you guys what the Chargers have to work with. Now, SpotRack right now has them slated as the number 5 team in the league as far as cap space with $32 million. Now, keep in mind that this doesn't put into account a couple of things. One, the Chargers are going to need around $10 million to fill their practice squad as well as reserve it for future players, the rookies coming in April. And number 2, there's some players on the roster that have not yet been accounted for. I'll actually scroll down here. We see Oday Abushi right there, Steven Anderson, which was a great re-signing for the Chargers, Michael Badgley, Jared Cook, Brandon Faison, and then Tristan Vizcaino, the competitive kicker guy competing with Michael Badgley this season. So I would expect with all that stuff kind of put together, the Chargers in realistic like spending money probably have closer to like $16 million, but that's $16 million to spend. And it doesn't mean like, oh, this guy, we need to sign like a huge name, pay him $16 million this year. Nah, the way that a lot of these contracts are being structured, at least this season, very low cap hit in 2021, and they kind of backloaded a little bit because the likeliness of the cap going up next season is tremendous with all these TV deals. We're starting to see, you know, fans come back to the stadium. The league just announced that the draft is actually going to be open to the public, and that's a huge step towards recovering the cap situation for the NFL going into next season. So there's going to be a lot more money to spend. One thing I have to reiterate before we get into these names, I know I'm kind of word spitting out here, guys, but this is an important thing to keep in track of too. The Chargers with $32 million right now, there's a big chance that a lot of this gets rolled over into next season. The reason for that being is that there's some really good free agents next season, and the Chargers in this 3-4 year window with Justin Herbert's rookie contract could really get aggressive next year. And with an extra $20 million or so, maybe even $30 million next season, they could really become competitive next year and fill a lot more starting holes after kind of assessing the situations that they put a band-aid on, I suppose, through the draft. So with that, guys, let's get into the top players. I know this is like a 7-minute intro, but there's a lot of information to get across here. Let's start here with cornerback. This morning, you guys will have seen my tweet that Steven Nelson is on the market. The Pittsburgh Steelers elected to terminate his contract, allowing him to go wherever he pleases as far as his next destination, as far as team is concerned. And Steven Nelson's a pretty solid cornerback, man. I would say extremely underrated. Not a guy that you've heard a lot about on my channel, and it's because, you know, he's just one of those guys. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was tremendously productive for them. He could offer, you know, number 1 cornerback upside. Of course, he is already like almost 29 years old, but you could say he had a late breakout. So for Chargers fans, this is one to keep an eye on. Very, very late addition to the free agent pool, and I think Steven Nelson could be grabbed at a bargain. I would say around $8 million or less per season annually, and this would be a solid ad for the Bolts. I'm not gonna lie. If we picked up Steven Nelson, I would feel a lot better going into the draft, you know, with that huge need of cornerback. I would still expect us to pick one up, but this really fills that hole immediately and allows us to become more comfortable and flexible in the draft. Next up, we've got Richard Sherman. Now, I see a lot of Chargers fans wanting this to happen, I suppose, and honestly, I'm not completely against it. If you guys saw the interview with him and Brandon Staley, our head coach, it was absolutely insane, the kind of chemistry that these two had, and they kind of alluded to the possibility of him coming to the Chargers. Now, he's probably not the best scheme fit for the Chargers. You know, lots of cover 3 and stuff like that is where you're going to see Richard Sherman thrive, but I do think he's adaptable, and I feel like if the Chargers want to make him work, they're going to make him work. For me, it doesn't make too much sense to cut Casey Hayward and then sign Richard Sherman. You're talking 2 older cornerbacks. It's going to cost probably around the same as what we cut Casey Hayward for, but I see the allure there. If we picked up Richard Sherman, again, I would feel a lot better immediately. Long term, I would still hope we pick up a guy in the draft that's highly competitive going into 2022, I should say. And then last guy right here, I was actually looking up his market value not too long ago, Brian Poole. This is probably one of the better slot corners you'll find in the NFL right now. He would be a great replacement for Desmond King, of course, who we traded away last offseason. Brian Poole's pretty great, man. And as far as his value right here, $4.3 or $4.3 million annually, he'd be kind of a bargain with what he would bring to his new team. A great cornerback or slot cornerback, I would say. I would expect us to play Chris Harris Jr. a lot on the outside as well as in the slot. So this offers some versatility. I would feel like we'd have a more complete cornerback core with Brian Poole on the roster. So that's where I'm going to go with there. I think my number one guy I would love to get as far as cornerback right now would be Steven Nelson. More realistically, I think we get a guy like Richard Sherman or maybe a no-name, somebody that we don't see coming. That's kind of what Tom Telesco is really good at doing. Like a lot of us were like Larry Warford and Austin Blythe when it came to interior offensive line. And then we ended up signing Matt Filer. And you know what? That was probably the best move that we could have possibly made after taking a look at some of his statistics and what he brings to the team per dollar value. So you never know what's going to happen, but these are three guys that I really like to replace the cornerback right there. Next up, we've got offensive line. Now, I'm going to list off a couple of names here. The likeliness of some of these guys coming to the Chargers is probably pretty low, but it's a position that we need to pay attention to anyway. Eric Fisher, 30 years old, probably going on 31 by the time the season starts. Immediate starter, and that's all you really need to know about Eric Fisher. He did have the injury last season, probably a big reason why the Chiefs decided to cut him, surprisingly, coming into this year. So really, I don't know how much they took on of his contract. I don't know how much he's really going to cost. They have him estimated here at $18 million annually, which I think is ludicrous. The possibility of this happening would free up the Chargers again as far as our first round pick, 13th overall. If we've got Eric Fisher on the roster, we can become so much more flexible because the biggest hole in the roster has now been filled. That's the only reason I'm kind of thinking Eric Fisher here. For me personally, I still kind of want a rookie over Eric Fisher. I'm not going to lie, and I think that's where the team is trending right now, but it's a guy to keep an eye on. Now, another guy actually kind of like more than Eric Fisher is still Alejandro Villanueva. Now, some Steelers fans are saying, "Oh, stay away from him. You know, he's starting to decline, this and that." And I completely understand that, but I don't think I want to ask Alejandro Villanueva to be my left tackle for 2-3 years. I'm thinking more like at this point, a free agency after the first couple of waves. Give me a 1-2 year option or 1-2 year deal on Alejandro Villanueva, because I feel like he would be a really good short-term solution that offers versatility and allows maximum flexibility. And that's, of course, because he plays pretty well at left tackle and left guard. If we decide to bring in a rookie, we need some help at left guard, left tackle, whatever, we can move him around the line. So we're not completely committed to his stability at the left tackle position if he starts to decline. Vice versa, if we have a really good left tackle at rookie, we can move him to guard. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces on this offensive line this season. You'll notice with a lot of the Chargers signings this offseason, the offensive linemen that they're bringing in, very versatile. A lot of these guys can play guard slash tackle if they have to. And that really offers a lot of backup, like a backup plan Bs to the offensive line if something happens to, like, let's say a Brian Bulaga, which we'll get into more with this next guy, Germaine Fetty. Now, this is a guy that I think that Chargers could realistically pick up as far as depth. He could compete for the starting job too. When we picked up Oday Abushi the other day, I was really impressed with that signing. I found a lot of value out of what he could bring to the Chargers playing. I think he would play right guard. This is kind of a scenario where I feel comfortable bringing in a backup, a quality backup in Germaine Fetty, and letting those guys compete in camp. Germaine Fetty, again, another very versatile guy. He's listed here as a right tackle, but he played a lot of guard for the Bears as well at a pretty decent level. So you let both of these guys compete for the right guard position, and both of them offer enough versatility that if something were to happen in season for the Chargers, we have two quality backups that can move around the line due to their versatility to keep those positions covered. Again, a prime example is Brian Bulaga, who's been suffering, with injury concern for a long time. If something were to happen to him, we'd have a great backup option in a Fetty or a Bushi if we were having to switch to bring somebody in to fill that right tackle position. So I like the versatility signings I'm seeing so far. Germaine Fetty, I think, would be a very, very cheap option. I'm talking in the realm of Oday Abushi's contract that would really offer, a competitiveness in camp as well as excellent depth if anything were to happen to this team. Next up, the Chargers. This is a position that is a growing concern for me. I don't know, as far as the Chargers draft capital, if they're going to be able to fill all these holes. And one of the biggest ones that I'm concerned with right now is edge. Now, I'm going to show you guys a couple of guys, edge rushers, that I think the Chargers should keep an eye on. Jadeveon Clowney is the first one. And of course, we've been talking about Jadeveon Clowney for a long time. Realistically, due to his maybe character issues, I don't know if the Chargers are really looking at Jadeveon Clowney at this point, unfortunately. Now, analytically, it would make sense. At least to me, for Jadeveon Clowney to join the Chargers, you got to really know what you're getting out of him. At this point, you know, his market value, let's see where it is right now. We're having internet issues. Excuse me, guys. At this point, I would see Jadeveon Clowney's value somewhere around $6 million. Of course, he's not going to want to go for $6 million, but I do think there's a possibility that his contract is really, really low. In terms of knowing what you're getting out of Jadeveon Clowney, though, you need to understand that he's not the best edge threat as far as pass rusher, but he's excellent against the run. And that's something that I want Chargers fans to understand when it goes to pursuing Jadeveon Clowney. If the Chargers do go after him, which, again, I don't know what the chances of that are, he would be more of a run defender than he would pass rusher, but I still see a lot of value to the Chargers, at least targeting him at this point. The next guy, and this is probably the one that impresses me most right now, guys, is Olivier Vernon. He really had a fantastic season last year with the Cleveland Browns. I would 100%, be confident in the Chargers, edge situation right now if we were to pick up Vernon. Really, really impressed me with what he did out there in Cleveland. Of course, he was playing, with the guys like Miles Garrett and stuff like that. The Browns really did see a resurgence, but he really did on his own. If you go take a look at him at PFF, had a really, really good season. So I do think Olivier Vernon is one of my favorite options right now for the Chargers to go pick up. As far as his contract, I'm not quite sure last season what we're talking about, $11 million. I would hope it would be a little bit cheaper than that. At this point, guys, in free agency, we're really talking about the cheaper contracts, okay? So $11 million is probably too high, but I would really see a lot of value out of a guy like Olivier Vernon, who's only around 31 years old right now. He would be a very, very good short-term solution for the Chargers as we start targeting guys maybe in this year and next year's draft. Finally, the last position before we get to the honorable mentions is safety. Actually, I don't want to pass up on this guy right here, actually, KJ Wright. Before we move on to safety, KJ Wright, also an excellent option for the Chargers. He had a really good productive season last year with the Seattle Seahawks. I would be very, very confident in him as well. Again, older, but offers immediate impact. Now, let's get into the free safeties before this video becomes half an hour long. Malik Hooker. Malik Hooker, a lot of guys are saying Malik Hooker should be the #1 target for the Chargers as far as safety. Of course, this comes with a lot of concern for Nasir Adderley. Chargers fans are starting to think that maybe the Nasir Adderley project's not going to work out. I still think we give him 1 year. I feel like Nasir Adderley, second-round pick, he's shown a lot of flashes. I'm really confident that if anybody can fix whatever issues he's having, it's going to be Brandon Staley. In the case of giving him some depth or bringing in a guy to help him develop, Malik Hooker could be a really good option here. Of course, the injury concern is what's got me most concerned. Only played 2 games last season. I think he had an Achilles injury, so he would be on a 1-year prove-it deal. If we're going to bring in a safety, I would hope it would be somewhere in the realm of short-term and very cheap, but I'd be on board with it, man. If I saw Malik Hooker get signed tomorrow by the Chargers, I'd be all about it. Next up, we got Will Parks. This is more of a connection to our defensive coordinator in Ronaldo Hill. I do think he has connections to Brandon Staley as well. This would be an excellent signing, again, for depth. We have to remain cautious of the Derwin James situation, okay? So if something were to happen, he could fill in that role. He could also fill in if something happens to Nasir Adderley, if he's underperforming. He's had some pretty decent seasons, but more of a depth guy for me. And then lastly, Trey Boston. See a lot of Chargers fans, asking about the possibility of a reunion with the Chargers. Trey Boston, of course, going on to the Carolina Panthers. Really, really solid production out there. And honestly, I'm about it. I'd be pretty confident in Trey Boston coming back in, holding down the true free safety position, and feeling like he would fit this system again very, very well. So those are going to be the safeties. Now, lastly, I'm going to give you guys a couple of honorable mentions. These are guys that I can see maybe the Chargers targeting because of the, formations that we're switching into this year. The scheme, fits that might be better for next year too. And they might be pretty solid signings for the Chargers next season, depending on what they want to operate as far as offense and defense. Firstly, on defense, though, Jarrell Casey, I'm not quite sure what he's going to get signed to as far as dollar value. He's 31, almost 32 years old. I would see a great value out of bringing in Jarrell Casey. He would be a solid piece or solid add in a new 3-4 scheme. Play him at defensive tackle, playing him at defensive end. I would see a lot of production still at Jarrell Casey. Again, I think another injury concern kind of guy, but if you can get him on the cheap, I think this would be a great, great piece to bring a transition into 3-4 for the Chargers. Next up, Todd Gurley. We've talked about him before. A lot of people are against this signing. Me in a little bit as well, but I do see the value that he brings because of what he does in the red zone. Very, very lethal in the red zone. Would not count on him being a #1 back, but the Chargers need a way to get into and score points in the red zone. And again, Todd Gurley, if he does anything, he does that very well. And then lastly, Cordarrelle Patterson, or Cordarrelle. I call him Cordarrelle Patterson. Very versatile wide receiver coming from the Bears. He's still on there in the block, 30, almost 31 years old. But again, he's not going to be your #1 receiver. I would see him more as like a versatile weapon. You can line him up at halfback, wide receiver, wherever on the field. I think he's a pretty good returner as well, and he would come very, very, very cheap to the Chargers. So I would see, again, more as like a depth piece, but you could throw in some plays that play to his strengths as well, and I would feel very confident about that. So in the comment section below, guys, I'd like you guys to list some free agents that are still available that you would like the Chargers to target. We have some work to do. The Chargers going into the 2021 season, as far as the draft is concerned, have a lot of holes. And I would like to fill some of these voids with quality players before we get to that time. And I do think the Chargers have a good chance of signing people before the NFL draft starts. We need to not put so much pressure on ourselves to reach for the left tackle if we still have a void there, to reach for, the edge guy if we still have a hole there, and especially for cornerback, in my opinion. We reach for a cornerback. I've seen that not work out a lot in the league for other teams. I don't want the Chargers to be in that situation. There's some still great corners in the first couple rounds, but I want them to get their guy. I don't want them to settle for the next guy because we have a huge need at that position. So if you guys enjoyed this content, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. This has been The Director. We'll see you next time, and as always, bolt up and stay frosty.